Yeah, and yeah, we've got this rematch here from the World Championship. Marcio Carvalho versus Paulo Vitor da Rosa. Also of note, both of them doing pretty well here, 15 wins and 13 wins, respectively, for these two players. Again, we're going to be tracking that over the course of this season, and you're going to see that number grow and grow and grow, and you're going to start to see where things flesh out. Now, this is still the early stages. There's 7 of these weekends. This is only the second one. But I tell you what, these are the matches, these are the weekends that people are going to look back to when the race starts to get really close down the stretch. And every single match has the same weight on it as any other match. So you're going to see the players playing at top form for the whole entire time. And when you get two players of this caliber going at it, it is a real treat.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're talking about the two players that just played the World Championship finals, which Paulo, of course, ended up winning, as a lot of the viewers will know. But yeah, by the way, here we didn't see Petty Theft on the Brushfire Elemental because there was no way to kind of put cards into Marcel's graveyard, so no need to bounce that. It's better to, pass the turn, Blood Chiefs first, and then Petty Theft, whatever the free drop is, or if you have better, like the Soaring Thought Thief, deploy that. Because now Paulo gets to check.
Are we going to Zero Sand?
Yeah.
He's going to Jitsu it into play, and look at this. Zareth Sand at the earliest possible convenience, not only hitting for 4, but getting either a Brushfire or a Scavenging Ooze onto the battlefield here for Paulo.
Yeah, and kind of nicely, that Zagoff Triome allows Scavenging Ooze to actually munch things.
Oh, that's sweet. Oh, boy, but look at this. Land into 5/5 Kazandu Mammoth means that the Great Henge can come down right now. Now, Paulo does have ways to interact here. He does have the Brazen Borrower, but still, that could come back down the next turn, depending on how things go.
Yep, that was the risk, right? You play Zareth Sand, but then your shields are down, and you allow the Great Henge because you couldn't bounce the Kazandu Mammoth. You deployed the Soaring Thought Thief instead.
Now, the good news from Paulo's perspective is that there was no creature follow-up with the Great Henge. Now, that could have been really bad, right? Another, whatever, Scavenging Ooze or something, counter, card, life, all of it. And instead, Marcio's going to have to just settle for 2 life off of this Henge. Now, the question is, can Paulo piece together a way to actually deal with the Great Henge? It is very problematic for the blue-black deck.
So with a land in hand, Paulo could delay the Great Henge by a turn by bouncing it with Petty Theft. That would still give the mana to Marcio, though. So you could wait until Marcio's turn to use the mana. You could do it right away, so force Marcio again to commit. We might start, though, with just an attack from Zareth Sand, since that's 2 extra cards from Soaring Thought Thief.
That's right. Plus, of course, Zareth Sand getting into the red zone again. Not only is this a reasonable clock, that was 6 damage, but the trigger is going to net him a Lovestruck Beast.
It's pretty hard to attack through a 5/5.
So it looks like Paulo Vitor prefers to try to win this game through damage and outrace the Great Henge. Is that a possibility here?
So if you bounce the Great Henge, then Marcio essentially, with this kind of board state, has to deal with the board, so probably can't just redeploy it immediately. However, if you leave it, you're giving Marcio a chance to essentially kind of go nuts, right? Like just play a bunch of cards. You could wait until Marcio casts a creature, though. If you do that, then you can bounce the Great Henge in response. That gave Marcio the mana, but might prevent drawing a card.
Interestingly, Paulo found Drown in the Loch with that scry off of the temple, so he'll be drawing that next turn as well, and perhaps he can leverage that to some great benefit. Lovestruck Beast is stuck at home on Paulo's side. It's just going to be a blocker this time. I think Paulo's considering when and on what to use this Brazen Borrower, perhaps even trying to line up another attack here, but we know the Henge is the most problematic, but of course, if he can actually kill Marcio this next turn, then it won't matter. It does seem like a tall order here, though, doesn't it?
Right, the Great Henge gained 4 life, and Zarasan, for all the sweet things that card does, it's actually really hard to get the second hit in. The first hit is actually not
You mean the
trivial, but
third?
the first, sure. Well, the
He's already
second one
got
was
two.
it's hard to get 2. But yeah, the
is.
ground does get gummed up pretty fast, and there's not much you can do to push through the damage. So you usually only get 1 hit, but that hit can be really big, right? If you get a large permanent.
That's right. So Drown in the Loch off the top of the library. There's Into the Story in hand, but there's going to be cards going to the graveyard here with at least the Thought Thief attack. And that Triumph is just cracking me up that it can actually activate the Scavenging Ooze somehow.
Right, and that means you can actually attack with it because now it threatens to just trade.
Right. Drown in the Loch could break up a double block. It could, if there's enough cards in the yard, though I assume at this point that there's not, it won't be able to counter the Great Henge, right?
Well, you would have to get to 9, right? And
9, yeah, I think there's only 5 right now. And then maybe another one going there from this block. Lots of respect here for Zarasan.
Yeah, and this is going to be, I think, exactly 7 cards. So 1 off getting the Zarasan to... Oh, sorry, you're right. 6. So yeah. Does trade, but to be fair, from Paulo's perspective, having the opposing board be empty is actually pretty nice, and you do get to fire off an Into the Story, so still have board presence and the ability to fire it into the story.
Saw a little head shake there from Paulo Vitor. I think maybe he didn't like how that ended up going in the end, but look at this land to pump up the elemental into Henge, into Scavenging Ooze. A big turn here for Carvalho.
Yeah, that was perfect, right?
That was brutal punishment there from Paulo.
Because the thing is, the 2 Scavenging Oozes already got milled, so that's like the third one.
Mm-hmm. Whew, that was rough. So I think maybe what might have happened there is that if Paulo would have been able to get to 8 cards in the yard, then the Zareth Sand would actually be enough to trade off for the 2 blockers, plus the third one got killed by Drown in the Loch. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, if it was 8 cards, that would work, but it wasn't. So that's what ended up happening.
I wonder if he thought it would be. Because if that were the case, then there would be no creatures on the board, and getting the Great Henge down just really wouldn't be much of a consideration. Instead, Marcio not only got the Henge down off of the land pumping up the elemental, but on top of it drew a card that he could cast right away with it. Very rough.
Also took the Luststruck Beast has been kind of not the best supporting cast. It's just kind of, hiding in the wings, like trying to figure out what's going on before going on stage. But I don't think Paulo has a way to turn the Luststruck Beast on. The deck has a 1/1, but if your opponent has over 8 cards in their graveyard, it's a free 2. So this Luststruck Beast is essentially a 5/5 defender.
Right. So we're going to see Scavenging Ooze block Scavenging Ooze. Then Paulo's going to activate, and now he's going to also draw 4 cards with Into the Story straight away. Now he's got Soaring Thought Thief, Drown in the Loch, and Petty Theft at his disposal. He also found Agadim's Awakening to perhaps refill his board if it were to go away.
Yeah. And Paulo has access to a lot of defense, right, between the Drown in the Loch and the Petty Theft. So things can't go too wrong from, Paulo's not worried about dying, essentially. There's a lot of, you have the 5/5 to block, you have your flyers. The problem is this Great Henge does outrace pretty fast because you're attacking the air for 6, but it draws extra cards and it gives Marcio more that opportunity to draw into removal spells to deal with the flyers. And there's not really something to do. For example, a Fire Prophecy or a Stomp can be pretty awkward because you do have a Drown in the Loch for those, but only 1.
By the way, one of the benefits that these are slightly time shifted just for tournament integrity reasons, but Paulo's actually in the chat and he did confirm. He said he thought he had a Thieves Guild Enforcer on the battlefield so that he would get an additional mill of 2 when he played the Brazen Borrower, but he didn't. And it was the other rogue that would give him that. And so it was what we thought, though, that he thought that he was going to be able to trade off Xerath Sand for 2 creatures plus a removal spell for the 1, and leave Marcio with no board whatsoever, which would make it very difficult to rebuild on the Great Henge. But as it stood, he left him with just 1 creature left, but it was the Brushfire Elemental, and that plus a land let him get the Henge down, and now Paulo has some work to do.
Yeah, although the work is looking pretty good now.
Yeah, it is. He's going to get him to 1 here. This is going to be very difficult for Marcio to come back from, especially with Brazen Borrower in hand here for Paulo.
Yeah, the fact that you can petty theft and play a free 1 flyer. Now the thing is, you would be incentivized to bounce the Henge. I think at 15 life you can. If you were a lower life total, this would be risky because of Embercleave and something like Fabled Passage on Brushfire Elemental. But you have a Lovestruck Beast, and that will happily jump in front of it.
And that's going to be game number 1, going to Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa. So a slight misstep there in the middle part of the game, but he's able to survive it and get through. Players are going to head into their sideboards now. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more magic here from MTG League Weekend. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back. Players are getting right into the sideboards here now. And what do you anticipate, Eduardo? Do either of these decks have major changes they can make to improve their matchup?
Well, I mean, for sure from Marcio's side, we're going to look at Ox of Agonas coming in, as well as the free copies of Clothis, God of Destiny. Those are going to be pretty important against the Rogues deck, as well as the additional copy of Scavenging Ooze. On Paulo's side, you see the Shark Typhoon come out in the Into the Story. It's worth pointing out, because of the escape creatures, Into the Story post-board is worse, and Paulo's build does not have Ruin Crab. So while it is a powerful card, it's a lot harder to make it work. And with Xerath Sand in the deck, you do already have a lot of expensive cards. That's also why there's only 3 copies of Into the Story. Paulo mentioned that essentially on Twitter, of saying, I'm only playing free because I just can't mill as many cards as the other Rogues decks can.
This opener, not quite as good as the one that Paulo had before. He does have a Blood Chief's Thirst, though, to kill whatever Marcio plays out first. And just would like to find a rogue to start getting in, maybe get some cards in the yard, and perhaps even get that Xerath Sand into play. He was able to leverage it quite strong. I mean, he ended up getting 2 hits off of it, and then trading it off for 2 creatures after that as well. Or 1 creature, I should say. It was going to be 2, but 1.
Still was indeed pretty strong. So this turn is not looking great for Paulo. You could Blush Chiefs first, the 1/1 as a tempo play. Drown of the Lock is actually Drown of the Lock is better than it should be in this position like this, because Marcio started with Fabled Passage, but it still won't stop a free drop.
Paulo really considering whether he wants to fire off this Blood Chief's Thirst. I mean, it can kill some pretty important cards on the other side of the battlefield, but as you mentioned, perhaps the tempo play is worth it.
Yeah. I also think you're giving Marcio information by doing that. So if Marcio had another free drop to play that isn't Lovestruck Beast, Marcio might be incentivized to not play it, right? So let's imagine Paulo kills the 1/1 and then Marcio doesn't have Edgewalling Keeper in hand. In that spot, Marcio might not run the Lovestruck Beast and go like, okay, I'll just run something else.
Right.
Like a Kazandu Mammoth, just because I don't have a 1/1. In this case, there's an Edgewalling Keeper, so I think this turn we're quite likely to see Phoenix of Ash come down, because next turn you get Innkeeper and Lovestruck Beast, but that's why that consideration was of not firing off the first.
That makes sense. Here comes the Phoenix of Ash, and the attacks are going to start flowing here for Marcio Carvalho, knocking Paulo down to 17 before passing the turn back. And this draw has really not come together very well for Paulo Vitor. He hasn't played anything yet.
Right. And I mean, the free mana cycle cards in Silumdi Vision or Zagoth Triumph, look, you have to commit a lot of mana to make them happen, but it makes sense. However, Paulo decides here that Edgewall Keeper is just not acceptable.
Here comes Drown in the Lock to counter that Edgewall Innkeeper. Though that does mean that Lovestruck Beast is free to resolve, and the 1/1 is still on the battlefield. Finally, there's something to get proactive here for Paulo. He finds a Soaring Thought Thief. Now we're going to see Bloodchief Thirst to take out the 1/1. Now that Marcio has committed the mana to the Lovestruck Beast, and of course, Paulo's going to be hoping that that strands the Lovestruck Beast back home. And it looks like that is the case right now. Yeah, that's gonna work out for Paulo.
Kind of funnily enough, I think Marcio is so far ahead in this spot with Great Henge and Scavenging Ooze coming down.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that Marcio shouldn't attack with Phoenix of Ash this turn.
Really?
It would just be correct, like especially now, because Paulo. I don't think Marcio's planning to attack with Phoenix of Ash because you had this sequence. Because if you run that into Soaring Thought Thief, essentially Paulo gets to block it, knows 100% it'll survive, and then gets to essentially mill 2 cards and hit something with Zareth Sen. And that could turn
sure.
game. Whereas in this scenario, if you don't attack, that sequence can't happen. So, and
Wow.
Marcio has the Great Henge, Lovestruck Beast, and Vivian, so can easily dominate.
Plus, and I think we do see that here as well, because it would have made sense for Marcio to attack first, right? If he wanted to, because then a Soaring Thought Thief couldn't come in and block the Phoenix because it could get pumped. Well, he is going to attack. Wow. You know, it's interesting because you having laid that out, you made a very compelling case for no attack there. And it felt like Marcio was kind of in line with that too, but he decided to go for it. Yeah, and it looks like he's going to pay the price here too.
Well, thankfully he's not, because nothing of relevance got milled, but that could have backfired very severely. So didn't happen, but but I think Marcio should take it down since we're not getting a permanent here. Because now
he's going to get a land or something, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not saying that's going to break the game, but like, he is getting something.
Yeah, just
you think though that Paulo missing there was enough to give Marcio the win here?
Yeah, I think Marcio was ahead already.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not much Paulo can do to essentially deal with Marcio's board, and it's just going to be more and more advantage. Like Vivian and the Great Henge do a lot of card advantage together.
Right. Yeah, the Great Henge being on the battlefield is such a liability here for Paulo. And this is, another turn that Marcio gets to take advantage of having that card. Here comes Vivian.
Yeah. So top card is a Kinzandu Mammoth. Not enough mana for that, but that's the thing is now how do you get fruit?
Right. Yeah, now Paulo's in an unenviable position of really having no good attacks, no good game plan going forward, but also being under significant pressure from Carvalho.
Yeah, there's just nothing to be done here. Paulo is facing 10 power now on attack potentially. Plus you have the 1/1 token that can block the 4/4. You have the beast token. I think an attack with 2 creatures is correct here, just because Phoenix of Ash escaping does draw a card, does manage the graveyard size to not make it into the story reality, so it makes an attack not viable. You don't want to leave in a position where the 1/1 has to block, because then your 5/5 stays at home.
I see. So the plan would be to block with Phoenix of Ash here.
If there's an attack, I suspect we won't see an attack, but yeah.
Yeah. Zarasan number 2 in hand for Paulo Vitor.
Yeah. Plus we have Scavenging Ooze that's managing any relevant cards from the graveyard.
Yeah, this one is all but over here in favor of Marcio Carvalho. But Paulo won the first game, so that would mean a game 3 coming up here. But it looks like Marcio just needs to go through the motions here. This slow draw from Paulo never really came together, even with connecting with Zaristan. He didn't need anything major, just to Edgewall Innkeeper, and yeah, looks like it's not going to be enough this time. And there's a concession there from Paulo. So what that means is we've got Marcio Carvalho and Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa going to a game 3. They always make it exciting for us no matter what. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have that game 3. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back. Game 3 between Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa and Marcio Carvalho. This is the last round here from our second league weekend as these two MPLers face off against each other. How does this opener look from Paulo's perspective?
It's a little slow, but on the play, it's fine. Law Mage's Domination, I wanted to highlight. It's a card a lot of these Dimir Rogues decks have played, but it's a lot worse in Paulo's deck because of the problem of, well, you're not milling your opponent as much, so an escape creature has more relevance, which means that Law Mage's Domination is less likely to cost less. That said, even at 5 or 6 mana, it's actually fine, right? If you can get a Lovestruck Beast in the later stages of the game, it's good.
Oh, and look at that. The Saurian Thought Thief, perhaps a turn late, but still a welcome addition here for Paulo Vitor because he can still set up for that turn for Zareth Sand, assuming that the Thought Thief's able to get through.
Yeah, so this is actually going to be an interesting turn. Paulo not having the Thought Thief on turn 2 was... I actually wonder if Paulo had drawn the Thought Thief the previous turn, if he would even have cast it, just because of Fire Prophecy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's interesting because you have to balance that out between the fact that multiple attack triggers from the Thought Thief can give you a better chance to hit something better with Zareth Sand. So it's kind of a tricky balance that you have to find there.
Yeah, but
remember, there's no
always...
cards in Yard here at all.
Yeah, well, there's 2.
Well, there's 2 now, but I'm saying like you do have to try to build up, so it can be tricky. By the way, Paulo says, I would not have played it on turn 2 had I had it.
That's good. Yeah. That makes sense, right? Because the Gruul deck often on turn 3 makes their play, so it makes sense to play it on turn 3. And I think that's a pattern we saw in 1 or 2 other games.
Mm-hmm. And this worked out beautifully. Look at that. A Lovestruck Beast on the battlefield now, along with Zareth Sand. And that plays beautifully around Fire Prophecy. No good targets for it at all.
Yeah, we might actually see Fire Prophecy plus Stomp, because Marcio does want a little bit more mana. So this would work out nicely where you get to get rid of this Zareth Sand and hopefully draw into something more relevant.
Yikes, that's the whole turn though?
I mean, you have to, right? You can't let Zareth Sand attack.
Definitely. I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying that's got to stink, right? If you're Marcio Carvalho, you're playing Gruul and you have to spend your entire turn just spending 2 burn spells to kill 1 creature. I think it's a big compliment to Zareth Sand.
It is, but at the same time, Paulo can't really punish Marcio. Paulo's hand is not extremely aggressive, and Marcio has access to 2 Vivian Monsters Advocate in hand, and look at the graveyard. It's just, empty. So...
Yeah, empty and getting emptier by the moment here. Cloth is gobbling things up. Yeah, that's rough. That would have been a really great turn for Paulo to be able to get in there and punish Marcio, but instead it looks like it's going to be some combination of Saurian Thought Thief and Heartless Axe. Still not a disaster by any stretch. Oh, and even has Drown in the Lock now, although, as we mentioned, that's actually just not doing a whole lot at the moment.
Yeah.
Yikes. Vivian is going to come down. Boy, this Clothis is a real problem.
Best card Paulo could draw might actually be I'm drawing a blank, but the one drop, right? Thieves Guild Enforcer. Since if you draw Thieves Guild Enforcer, you get to attack into Vivian. Now that's actually okay. That opens the Petty Theft opens a ton of options.
Okay, Paulo's going to get in with a Saurian Thought Thief. Currently just ignoring Vivian. He has Blood Chief's Thirst in hand. You see Lil Mage's Domination, Heartless Act, and Brazen Borrower as well.
Probably going to see a Petty Theft. I wonder if on Clovis or Vivian. I guess the Vivian is the kind of highest impact card, so that's the one you have to return. And then you can play Brazen Borrower and kind of clean it up perfectly with Blood Chief's First, since that would be Marcio's entire turn, most likely.
Paulo's left himself enough mana to cast Brazen Borrower, but also leave up Heartless Act here.
Oh yeah, Paulo's saying if I milled a better card, I might have won on turn 4. Rather than this 5/5 that still can never attack.
Yeah, this is the second time this match that he's had the Lovestruck Beast just sort of sitting there as a 5/5 defender.
Actually, turns out that if Paulo had taken the land, I think Paulo might have actually taken it down, because of if you took the land, Marcio just didn't have an untapped mana source in hand, so that would have taken away the ability to actually play the 2 burn spells. I think Zara Sand is a permanent card in general. I believe you can take a land. So that would have been...
It's any permanent, yeah.
So it would have been an interesting game in that sense, even though Lovestruck Beast is better in the abstract in this matchup by a pretty wide stretch.
Yeah, it is. And it's still going to do some work potentially down the line, though. I think Paulo's hoping to kind of close the door a little sooner if possible.
Yeah.
There's Edgewall Innkeeper into Bone Crusher, Marcio, making sure that he gets his value out of it no matter what. No way for Paulo to interrupt that, even with Heartless Act in hand.
I like Marcio's line here, realizing that Vivian would be pretty vulnerable. Decides instead to do this, where you draw a card, set up a board, and get on top of that this stomp on Brazen Borrower.
And there's that stomp. That was all on Marcio's end step. Now it's Paulo's turn. So this is kind of the Innkeeper.
Yeah, it's because the Innkeeper is giving a drink to the Lovestruck Beast so it can go in. It's a love story as old as time.
It really is. Stolen love. You gotta love it. That's a huge hit, though. 6 damage.
Yeah, but this is not looking great for Paulo, unfortunately, because of... I mean, this is nice, right? You get to do tempo attacks. You get to clear the board. We might see this Heartless Act now just to prevent a great hand, right? Even though it's not in hand, you do have to play around cards that might be there. Paulo knows about Vivian. Thanks to Blood Chief's First, probably has an answer to Vivian directly. But still, this is looking pretty decent, actually, for Marcio, between the number of cards in hand, the ability to stop pressure, and on top of that, Clovis buys so much time.
Clovis has done a very good job of slowing things down, both on the graveyard front from Paulo's perspective, as well as just getting extra mana and drains here and there as well. It's a real clock in the matchup, too. I mean, this card means that this game will end at some point in the not too distant future if Paulo can't do it himself.
Right. Like I mean, inevitability is definitely happening.
Right. And that isn't necessarily the case for this deck normally.
Yeah. And Paulo exiled the Great Henge there just because a hit with Zerasand this turn would be very nasty if that was top decked.
Makes sense. So we see Vivian back on the battlefield now.
Okay, so now, yeah, so Marcio has a choice between Scavenging Noon and Edgewall Innkeeper this turn. The Edgewall Innkeeper was on top of the deck, so it speaks volumes as to how much value Marcio is putting on the Scavenging News in that context. because you essentially declined a free card from the top of your deck. Now, the Soaring Thought Thief is kind of nice because that's going to, I believe, help it become a free. So now we can have a pair of free flyers coming in.
Looks like no. As Paulo, if that were the case, he would have played it pre-combat, right?
Might have decided not to mill extra cards because you have a higher chance of hitting Ox of Agonis.
Okay, sure. He can also do it now to make the trade happen. But
Right.
Can't feel great to be trading off your Soaring Thought Thieves for the beasts that that Vivian made. Now, the good news is that Paulo's last card is a Blood Chief's Thirst to kill Vivian, but the bad news from Paulo's perspective and great news for Marcio is Clothis is still doing Clothis things, and Paulo's completely out of gas now. Now, he has a good board, but we've seen the ability of this Gruul deck to reload hand while also putting cards on onto the battlefield can get out of hand very quickly. Marcio just needs to get to that point.
Marcio's deciding here whether or not to just go for the Shatterskull smashing. You could remove a land to make a smashing go for X equals 6, get rid of 2 frets. You could have also done smashing for X equals 4, but there's nothing else to do this turn, even if you did that. So might as well, I think, get rid of the Luststruck Beast, since that's probably the most long-term threat, and of course the Soaring Thought Thief.
It is tempting to just kill the Thought Thief and the Innkeeper, right? If you have anything else you can do.
Yes. Wow.
Because just the Innkeeper? Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, that does effectively take the Lovestruck Beast out of contention. I mean, I don't think that there's a card. Oh, wow. The perfect draw for Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa. Really needed to see an end of the story and does. Whoa, that was a nice rip.
Yeah. Fortunately, Heartless Act against Vivian tokens is something we've seen a lot of, and it's not good for the Heartless Act side of the story.
That's right. So is it even possible for Paulo from cards from his deck to let that beast attack? Like the Thief Guild enforcers are pumped up now, right? So
it might be possible a little later down the line if Marcio handles the graveyard size with Clothis or an escape creature.
But I mean, as long as there is the 8 cards in there, I don't know if he even has a card that'll do it. I mean, he can steal another one.
The Shark Typhoons got boarded out, so that would have been the one way to do, right? Make one shark, but those got boarded out, so. Yeah. And next turn, Paulo, let's see, has access to 7 mana. Gets to do at some point an Agadeem's Awakening for maximum, but the problem is this Vivian is going to generate a ton of advantage.
Right now, it looks like there's a Lovestruck Beast on top of the library here for Carvalho. And another Reach Beast added to the battlefield. There's a Lovestruck Beast as well, and this one is slipping away from Paulo. You mentioned it, Marcio able to generate huge advantage here.
Yeah. Let's see, Marcio has, enough mana to escape this Phoenix of Ash.
That also, by the way, turns Clothis on. Also, by the way, the Thought Thief is down to a 1/3 again. So things going very much in Marcio's favor this turn.
I'll note
Heartless Act's just a pain again, although it can take Clothis out, I suppose.
I was going to say, the Clothis being animated is sometimes a drawback. I think in this state it's fine because the board state is so large. But, I mean, if Paulo can top deck a Lull Mage's Domination and take the Clothis, there might be a chance to just reverse the tendency and force the Gruul player to be the one that has to attack.
Pretty rough here for Paulo. He has to use Heartless Act just to remove the +1/+1 counter from Phoenix. so we can block for the turn another land off the top. And this Agadim's Awakening has a heck of a lot riding on it. What can he get? Just a Brazen Borrower and Soaring Thought Thief? Is that what I saw?
I think we have enough mana as well to get the Zareth Sand back.
Okay.
Which I think this has to kind of be done. You're behind, so you need to make things happen. So you can't, have it didn't say please just kept up.
Well, this is going to put the graveyard back to above 8, which means that the Soaring Thought Thief is a 3/3 flyer, but it just trades off once again for a 3/3 Reach Beast.
Yeah.
Rough.
And that's certainly not a position that's very enviable, right? You're trading your card for a +1 on a Planeswalker.
That is extremely difficult. So Paulo is going to have to get very lucky here and draw another into the story to put himself back into it. In the meantime, Marcio doesn't need anything. He's got Vivian Monster's Advocate just fueling the fire.
I think that's a good point you made, Marshall. It's essentially Paulo has to draw into the story, but Marcio essentially has into the story already every turn.
On the battlefield. And by the way, here's another one, Ox of Agonis now. And that's an innkeeper on top of the library as well. And this one has well and truly gotten out of hand. Paulo Vitor Rosa down to just 8 life.
Yeah, and Marcio's just trying to figure out how to, a combination of closing this game and making sure to not lose. But at 19 life, it's pretty hard for Paulo to just, take that all down in one fell swoop.
All right, Paulo's going to take some medicine here. Phoenix of Ash gets in for 2. And off the top of the library, there's an Edgewall Innkeeper. There's also a Kazandu Mammoth, but I think he's finally out of mana here.
Well, still get to stomp a Brazen Borrower if you want to as well.
Not bad.
Yeah. Probably do it now while Paulo's tapped out. You could surprise Paulo, but I don't think at this point this game is about hidden information. Kind of everything you need to know is already on the board.
Right. It's about raw resource advantage at this point, and that is firmly in the hands of Marcio Carvalho. Well, it's a Zagoth Triumph, so he could take another spin here, but is he going to be alive? That is the question. He's going to send Brazen Borrower in, try to take a chunk out of the loyalty of Vivian, but the 2 reach creatures on the other side may have something to say about that.
Yeah, so I was checking Paulo's deck list, and I just don't see a copy of Ugin the Spirit Dragon. And yeah, that might do it. I think. To be fair, the general idea of this matchup is you try. This is why the Rogues deck has to kind of play tempo a little bit in this matchup. Is given more time, I think the Gruul deck takes over. So,
which is crazy, right? The red-green deck takes over card advantage-wise over the blue-black deck. What kind of world are we living in?
Well, it's the Great Henges world. Even though we didn't have the card, we had Vivian, we had Ox. And to be fair, that's one of the things about the Gruul decks in the post-board games is, you get access to Ox of Agonis and Phoenix of Ash, and sometimes your opponent randomly gives you that card for free just by playing their cards.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really rough. But to be fair, we saw Paulo kind of give himself that chance in these games by going, with the Zareth Sand on turn 4 on the play, but then hit a Lovestruck Beast and no way to attack with it. So didn't have the board presence. Marcio was able to answer back with a double burn spell, getting rid of Zareth Sand, which was kind of Paulo's main game plan at that point. And Paulo could put on pressure with other cards. So then Marcio was able to take over eventually, right? Run out Paulo out of resources, got to stick a Vivian, some escape creatures, and that was it.
And now a huge attack coming in from Marcio Carvalho. Blood in the water here against Paulo Vitor, who just has Drown in the Lock and some blockers left over.
Paulo in chat saying it was a complicated match. I'm sure I could have won both games with different plays, which you were talking about this, Marshall, all the time, right? Like you rewatch a game, ask yourself, maybe I could have won this one. This is definitely one of those.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I mean, we also have, information of the full hands, which definitely affects things, right? When you don't know what your opponent has, for example, that double burn spell, Paulo didn't know that Marcio had those 2 burn spells and was just lacking a land. So it's very difficult to make that, to make some of these calls, right? With Clofist generating the mana in that spot.
That's right. So ultimately, Marcio Carvalho is going to pick up the last match there over Paulo Vitor, Damo, Rosa. We're going to take a short break, but then we do have one more match to bring you before we sign off, so don't go anywhere. This is the weakness, of course, of ramp decks, is that they are vulnerable to hard counters, where sometimes the control player just says, sure, like ramp all you want. I'm just going to counter the stuff that actually matters. And I think that's the case here as well.
Yeah, it's
a couple of lands off the top for Autumn Burchett. And William Huey Jensen has found the victory here in incredible fashion. This was just an awesome game to watch from both perspectives. Both players playing at such a high level. Ultimately, though, it's a Hall of Famer, William Huey Jensen, who takes down the match.
Unreal game for
there from both sides, Cedric. What a treat to get a chance to watch that game. Isn't it this time of the game when
I would be playing with my dog if I had one right now, given how this. Oh, hold on.
Oh no,
I can't win, but I have an idea.
What is Brad doing?
Okay.
Oh no, I do not like it when Brad rubs his hands together like that. He's leaving.
Yeah. Okay, I like it.
Oh, is he gonna barge into VVD's room?
I'm thinking easy disconnect the Wi-Fi.
Look at VVD.
Yeah, he has no idea.
He's like, what is going on?
Okay.
And remember, Brad's on 0 timeouts here. Like, if he times down, no! He's gonna try to make the play for him. It was his only out. Oh, he's going for the concede button. And there's the big handshake. Brian Branduin picks up the win here. Brad thinking outside the box.
And here's the Shark Typhoon. Now, is this is just as much of a problem for Ken here, because Shota has exactly the play we talked about, right?
Exactly. Now we got Brazen Bar as another option. Brazen Bar, Heartless Act,
Even better
both do
than
the same thing. Yeah, you get a little bit of value as well. And now we're going to see that Shark Typhoon with a counterspell backup.
Hey everybody, welcome back to coverage of MTG League Weekend. We're watching the rivals today do battle within their own league for match points that will sort them out into end of season tournaments that are super, super important for their lives of staying in the MPL, possibly getting relegated down to the rivals league or getting kicked out altogether. Let's find out who we're going to be watching for our next feature match here in round number 12. Shahar Shenhar versus Seth Manfield. 10 wins to Shahar's name, 11 wins so far over our 2 weekends for Seth Manfield. This is a Gruul Adventures Mirror, certainly the most popular deck among the MPL and the rivals this weekend. We're going to start here in game number 2 with Seth Manfield up a game. Let's dig in.
All right, so Seth up a game, Shahar Shenhar versus Seth in the mirror. Both of these players have similar win totals. You can see 11 wins for Shahar versus 10 for Seth. Ooh, double wilt opener here for Seth. So he certainly has his bases covered as far as some of the problematic cards that you could see on the other side. But as it stands, Shahar hasn't actually drawn any of them.
Yeah. Well, that's actually why wilt has kind of been this sideboard card in the Gruul mirrors is while the Great Henge especially, but sometimes Embercleave can really matter in these mirrors. The fact is, if wilt is bad, you can just cycle it. You can just go like, okay, bye, get a new card. But if you do, sometimes they play the Akroan War, the Great Henge, or Embercleave, and having a card that is that efficient at answering these expensive permanents can really turn the tide. And sometimes on an Embercleave or the Akroan War, you can also get additional card advantage from your opponents getting into an attack and essentially kind of flipping the situation.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, just taking away that +1/+1 and the double strike all of a sudden might lead a what was going to be a block in their favor into one that's in yours, not even a trade, but in your favor. That could absolutely happen. Now, the interesting thing is if the draw doesn't line up properly, you can also cycle away Wilt. The question is, when do you do that? And we may have to see that here because as we can see, Shahar has gone a little bit more in the mid ground. He's got the Thrashing Brontodon. So it's both a threat and an answer, though it's not a particularly great threat or a particularly great answer. So it's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, it kind of does both poorly, but at the same time, it does remain, as you say, a threat. It is still a body on the board. By the way, you see Seth, I believe, deciding on Scavenging Ooze in the end because that way Shahar commits. If Seth had decided to use Fire Prophecy on the 1/1, Shahar would just go with Bone Crusher Giant, so not much of a point there. And that would be really bad news for Seth. Thankfully, those wilts are going to start looking great very soon.
Yeah, great hinge off the top here for Shahar Shenhar. And it's the perfect timing. He can play a land and play it thanks to the 6 power from Lovestruck Beast plus Friend on the battlefield. But as you mentioned, double wilt already in hand here for Manfield. And of note, the Great Henge wouldn't be able to actually cast anything this turn. So it would just be basically tap all my mana, gain 2 life, and Seth could trade off one of his wilts for it.
Yeah, so
is it worth waiting in Shahar's seat? You know, you'll often see the players wait for Edgewall Innkeeper. They'll play that and then the same turn play an adventure creature to kind of lock in getting that card back at the minimum. Is it possible we see that with Great Henge as well?
It would be possible, but you have the 5/5 now, and if it gets dealt with, or if you want to trade with it, you essentially admit that you wouldn't be able to attack, for example, in this spot if you didn't play the Great Henge, because then you would lose the value from it. So that's why we see Shahar going for it. Is the upside of it working is you probably just win the game. And if it doesn't work, at least Seth has to probably give up a turn. By going something like Wilt, you only leave the door open for something like Fire Prophecy or Stomp. And Shahar can play Thrashing Brontodon, which doesn't walk into those cards, rather than the Bone Crusher Giant. And that gives you 2 additional turns to draw into something like Edgewall Innkeeper to draw a card off Bone Crusher Giant.
All right, here's the wilt in hand here for Manfield.
Yeah, that was the easy part of the turn. It's the second part that's less obvious.
Right.
Yeah. So, yep, we should see Thrashing Brontodon just because it doesn't walk into Fire Prophecy. It's the more resilient of the threats. Again, gives you that chance for Edgewall Innkeeper.
For toughness, also relevant, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's definitely why.
But Seth's going to stay mana efficient here and Bone Crush with Stomp. Hey, and there's even an Edgewall Innkeeper.
I think Seth would have much preferred a land here, though. An untapped land would have allowed Vivian to take over the game. Edgewall Innkeeper, though, kind of nice. You get to attack here for free because of the threat of activation for Scavenging Ooze, and then play Edgewall Innkeeper, Bone Crusher Giant, get closer to that land. But you don't have the tempo positive play of being able to Fire Prophecy Shahar's next threat. So that would put the Vivian more at risk, even if a land was drawn. Yeah, at this point, I mean, Lovestruck Beast is a good card in the matchup, but this is a pretty rough spot for Shahar, just because Seth has access to so much more action, and Shahar is essentially going to have to be the aggressor because there's just not access to many resources, and a Vivian Monsters Advocate is looking very likely to be cast here, and for Seth to untap with it. we might see an alternative line, but like where you would go Fire Prophecy up and Thrashing Brontodon, but I like just casting it here. This is the highest chance of it affecting the board. And then if you get to untapped and prevent any Ember Cleaves, then you're probably golden, honestly.
Yeah, super ridiculous spot here for Shahar, having to now try to get through to this Vivian, and it doesn't look like that's possible, at least currently. Here comes Edgewall, Innkeeper, and Bone Crusher, but there better be a miracle on the other end of this Bone Crusher, or this Innkeeper trigger. It's a Kazandu Mammoth. Again, a fine magic card, but as you mentioned, the real key here is, does Seth get to untap with Vivian? And it does look like that's going to be the case here.
Right. I'm not even 100% sure on playing it or not here, because one of the only ways I think Shahar can win is the Great Henge, because of the value that Seth is generating. So by playing the Kazandu, you're maybe not giving yourself a chance to win, because Shahar... Jeez. Yeah, the problem is, even if you attack with all the creatures, Seth will just trade, because you're going to generate more advantage as the game goes on. So I'm not sure about the Kazandu Mammoth here, just for that reason. It's not as if like just 5 is going through or anything.
Right. I mean, but Seth got to play 2 free cards off the top of his library. He even drew an extra card off of one of them, and he's hitting his land drop as well as making a 3/3 token all in this one turn. I mean, how in the heck is Shahar supposed to keep up with this? Ooh, Shatter Skull Smashing. Does he have enough mana?
It can at least get rid of Vivian.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, not that that's going to solve all of his problems, but it's a step, right? Another turn of Vivian, he may not be able to survive at all.
No, for sure. If the more Vivian sticks around, it's just 2 to 3 cards per turn potentially, and that's just not something that Shahar is going to be able to beat.
So now the advantage is still to Seth because he's ahead on board enough, but also because of his hand, right? Like, he has access to more stuff. Shahar's completely out of gas.
Right. Seth has access to removal, beats a top deck, one of the best top deck cards in the Accruing War or the Great Henge or Embercleave, as well with Thrashing Brontodon. You can keep the pressure up, and access to the best threat in play with Scavenging Ooze, since any trades that happen grow the oozes up, and that's just going to become difficult. At this point, it's a top deck where Seth is at least 2 answers ahead.
Yikes. Not a good place to be if you're Shahar Shenhar. Seth Manfield looking good here in game 2. He is up a game as well. And it looks like Seth is perfectly fine trading off any of these creatures for Lovestruck Beast with the addition of the Fire Prophecy. Huge attack here from Seth Manfield. 5 creatures into the red zone.
So to kind of explain this attack, which might look a little weird, if you're watching and wondering, wait, if Seth's advantage, why take any risk? But this is actually the reverse of taking risk, because by clearing Shahar's board, Seth will come ahead, right? There will be more threats coming, and you have Fire Prophecy and Bone Crusher Giant. The only cards that really survive in this attack, the Brontodon and the Lovestruck Beast, would trade for either the Stomp or the Fire Prophecy. So this is going to allow Seth to clear the board, and essentially for Shahar to have nothing. And then Seth can easily come into a win. If Shahar has access to too many cards, something like a Vivian could be problematic, because then Shahar is capable of protecting the Vivian and maybe drawing more creatures and winning the game. So this is essentially Seth taking a proactive step to counter Vivian Monster's Advocate.
Really great stuff there, Eduardo. And you can see the advantages that Seth has here. Not only can he rebuild the board faster because he's got cards in hand to do so, but as you mentioned at the beginning, this is all food for oozes as well. These oozes are going to have a lot to munch on in the graveyard, with a bunch of creatures going into both of the graveyards now. So really tough position here for Shenhar. Is there a way out for him with no cards in hand right now?
So there's an answer to the Great Henge and Embercleave, so no, those aren't there. Accruing War is the same problem, and Vivian would have been the answer with a fuller board, but at this point, it's really hard to protect Vivian Monster's Advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and there's a Shatter Skull Summon. Okay, now to answer your question, no, there are no draws.
So that Shatter Skull Smashing there for Seth Manfield really kind of put things out of reach. What is it going to be? It's a forest off the top of the library, and that is going to leave Shahar Shenhar woefully behind here. Seth Manfield putting the finishing touches on a victory here to cap off the weekend. Seth has 11 wins, and he would move up to 12, keeping Shahar at the 10. 12 wins for Seth. Middle of the pack, not particularly great. That would put him at 12-12, a even 500 record. But against the caliber of competition that you face, that's a record that you can actually build off of.
Right. Well, I mean, so many matches are left, right? Every win matters, as we've been pushing a lot. Right. And I mean, you got to take your wins where you can, right? Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to overcome the deficit with 2 extra wins, because Shahar's at 10 out of 24, and that's a lot harder to come back from.
That's right. And every single one is going to count, especially as we see the standings start to take place over the course of the weeks. And a Kazandu Mammoth off the top is not good enough for Shahar Shenhar. He's going to have to say good game. And Seth Manfield improves to 12 wins, defeating Shahar